I was discriminated against all my life because of my golden child sister. Finally, I got my sweet revenge on my wedding day. I faced discrimination my entire life because of my golden child sister, and she even tried to walk down the aisle at my wedding. Finally, I got my revenge. My parents always favored my sister, and it was far from subtle. If she accused me of something, they'd believe her and punish me. But if I accused her, even with undeniable proof, they'd give her a lighter punishment and find a way to scold me too. My birthday cake always had to be her favorite flavor, and my parents pretend they didn't know I hated it. They always bought her more than me and took us where she wanted, even if it was supposed to be about me. My sister grew up spoiled and used me as a punching bag. At first, she mostly ignored me, but things got worse when we were teens. She ended up with no friends, and her behavior deteriorated. Did her friends move away or ditch her because she was mean? I don't know, because we were never close. My parents boasted about her achievements but never mentioned any issues, whereas they constantly highlighted my flaws as teasing material. I only knew she had no friends because we went to the same school, and I noticed she was no longer with people. Meanwhile, I was fairly popular. My sister realized this and suddenly turned me from an occasional punching bag to someone she needed to take down constantly. She started accusing me and my friends of more things. My parents stopped letting me hang out with anyone, with excuses like, "They're not good people according to your sister," or, "Why are you trying to leave us? Why can't you be like your sister and enjoy family time?" What saved me from complete isolation was my extended family. Most of them lived in the same hometown, and I got along well with my cousins despite some age differences. At one gathering, they invited me to something. I don't remember what, and I sadly replied that I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. When asked why, my kid self bluntly said it was because I wasn't allowed to have friends since my sister didn't have any. This got back to the adults, who apparently tore my parents apart later. I was scolded for lying and grounded for a month, but after that, they gave me some leeway, so it was worth it. My sister changed schools. I guess the humiliation of our extended family knowing her social status was too much, so she demanded to switch, and my parents immediately obliged. Even though it cost them more since the school was further away, she made friends at the new school. However, she never went back to mostly ignoring me. Having felt the power to mess with me and being angry that I told the family she had no friends, she never let me go. My life remained difficult. Her friends would come over and bully me, which my parents called light teasing. I never invited friends over because my parents were awful hosts, or my sister would accuse them of stealing, and my parents would believe her. I did become close to my cousins though, as my parents never dared to treat family that way. Then I got my first boyfriend. I didn't want to bring him home, but my parents insisted. At one point we were separated and he came to find me to tell me my sister was flirting with him. She came over in skimpy clothing, batting her eyelashes, and started telling him how bad I was and how good she was. He was irked and ran off to find me. Of course, my sister told my parents a different story, that my boyfriend had tried to flirt with her, but she naturally refused since she couldn't do that to me. Guess who my parents believed? My boyfriend wasn't perfect, but I immediately believed him for a mean reason. Remember, I was a teen suffering from unfair treatment. I was very resentful and moody and hated my sister as much as she hated me. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's talk about looks. I hadn't mentioned them yet because they weren't relevant. My parents were overweight and liked showing love via food, giving more food, buying treats, etc. My sister was also overweight, whereas I was not. I've always been kind of skinny because punishment often included no treats or snacks. Obviously, weight isn't what matters, personality is. But my sister, even then, was already rude and spoiled. Even her flirting attempts were bad because she never learned to work for anything since she could demand, and my parents would deliver. Added to that, the fact that she didn't look like some sexy model, even my self-conscious teen self didn't believe my boyfriend would try and cheat on me with her. Anyway, my parents prohibited me from dating such a horrible boy. I did try to keep going in secret, but it was hard, and the relationship ended. I did get another boyfriend, but again, my sister accused him of flirting with her when he refused her advances. Again, my parents believed her. I tried pointing out how this happened again, but they decided that I was incapable of making good choices and kept picking bad boyfriends. The relationship couldn't handle the Romeo-Juliet situation and fizzled out again. I would eventually get called a slut in high school as I was fine with making out with boys and such but refused to have relationships. Thankfully, it never got back to my sister or parents. My sister did bring one boyfriend home during all this time. He was paraded with pride, and my parents spent every second telling me how good he was and why I couldn't be like my sister and find myself someone like that. Until he stopped showing up and suddenly he was a conniving bastard that tricked my sister. Oh well, and the unequal treatment continued. At this time, she had more spending money, and her curfews were much better than mine. She was free to go anywhere at any time, while I couldn't. If I pointed it out, my parents would say it's because she's older, but when I reached that age, I still didn't have the same treatment she had. And when I pointed it out, they denied they ever said that or claimed it was because I couldn't be trusted like she was, using my sister's accusations against my boyfriends and friends as proof of my bad judgment. Time goes by, and it's time for my sister to graduate. She was accepted into a college, not a very well-regarded one, and she had no scholarship or anything. Again, because only her achievements were told to me, I don't know which colleges she even tried for, so I can't say how badly she was rejected. I do know her grades were bad in school though, because whenever she got a B, we would celebrate. I would usually get good grades, but my parents refused to celebrate, claiming since I always got those, what was there to celebrate? My parents naturally made a lot of fanfare and told her they'd pay for everything. I was relieved she'd be going away. Not that it made my life any easier. She'd always come home every other weekend and somehow stuff kept missing from my room, or some other issue she'd think of to make my life miserable. My curfews were still strict. Eventually, my mom came to talk to me about my impending graduation. I'm only a year younger than my sister. She told me that since they were paying for my sister's college, they had no money to pay for mine, so it would be better for me to start working immediately after graduation and wait until my sister finished university to see if they could afford something for me. Oh, and if I decided to stay at home, I'd have to pay for all my stuff, part of the bills and rent. I pointed out that I could get student loans. Mom said yes, except no, because they were so caring towards me and I had such bad judgment that they would decide if a college was worth my getting into debt or not. I'm not sure how they'd stop me from getting loans, but I didn't ask. Scholarships weren't mentioned. They had no idea what my grades were anymore and never believed in my capabilities anyway. I didn't bat an eyelid. I simply said okay. My mom clearly didn't expect that and kept prying. Maybe she hoped I'd throw a tantrum so they'd have an excuse to never pay for my college, but I said nothing except that I understood their position, thanked them for caring, and that was that. My dad later tried the same, but I also refused to be emotional. You see, after a whole lifetime of their terrible parenting, I never had any expectations towards my education. I knew they would find an excuse to not pay for mine and make my life miserable. I never believed they would eventually pay if I worked and waited for my sister to graduate. I had been preparing for college for a long time. I could barely go out, my friendships were slim, so I had a lot of time to study. And study I did because I saw college as my only chance to be free. Well, the time came, and I worked my ass off and got a scholarship, not to anywhere like Ivy League or anything like law or medical school, but it was a good enough course in a decent college with a full scholarship. Knowing my sister would hate it and try to stop me via my parents, I put my achievement on social media at the same time I told them, even forcing myself to thank them in the post. Now they couldn't forbid me from going as they'd have to explain to the family why not. Initially, they were even a little proud and boasted about it, and then I guess my sister got to them and they changed gears and even asked me if I was sure I wanted to go. They let slip that my sister wasn't doing well in college, and since she was smarter and had better judgment than me, I'd suffer worse. I obviously stuck to my guns. They weren't happy but couldn't do anything. College was my savior. I started being happy. I still contacted my parents and visited on holidays and such, but since they refused to pay for anything, I could excuse not going a lot due to money. During this time, I avoided introducing any man to them, and my sister stopped going to college. I know she didn't graduate because, again, they'd have made a fanfare about it. She moved back home, paying no bills or rent, but it's different, my parents said, and started working at the same company as my mom, obviously thanks to my mom pulling strings. This was all presented to me as a point of pride. Almost there, I promise. I met my husband around this time. You know those people who say, if I were in that situation, I'd have done something. My husband is the type who actually does. I'm the type who is meek and a doormat in any situation and then can't sleep at night wishing I had done something, had thought of something witty to say, etc. I'm the person who can't help but cry when I'm angry. My husband is the guy who claps back immediately. He loves drama and loves to resolve it. He's the guy that if he doesn't immediately reply to a slight, you better start worrying because he won't forgive and forget, he's just doing something worse for revenge. He's the one who wanted me to post here and wanted to post on a nuclear revenge board too but decided what we did wasn't nuclear. People were baffled that I got together with him, But just because I was incapable of acting like him due to my upbringing, it didn't mean I didn't like it. I love that my husband does what I can't, and he treats people well as long as they do the same to him. When we discussed marriage, we decided we didn't care much about the ceremony due to our budget, as we'd rather spend on a dream trip to Europe for our honeymoon. As for where to do it, since his family was spread out and mine was still mostly concentrated in my hometown, we decided to do it there. We weren't living too far off either, so we could take some long trips during the weekends to manage stuff. Plus, there was some work flexibility, so we could stay in my hometown for a bit too if needed. We sent out the engagement announcement and the save the date for a few months later. At this point, my parents naturally demanded to meet my man. I wanted to grow a spine and refuse, but was having a hard time. The distance had made me think maybe my parents weren't so bad. Well, my husband looked like I had canceled Christmas when I told him I would at least ensure they were never alone with him. See, he had been getting ready for this. He even bought a high-quality recorder he could hide in a pocket to record it all. He was stoked, thinking of all the ways he could refuse my sister's advances, insult her, and then spread the recording of her attempts to my family. So off he went alone and excited to meet them, and came back later euphoric. Babe, you won't believe the awful things they wanted. Babe, we can screw them over so bad. There's so many possibilities. I was confused and wanted to hear the recording, but he smartly told me it was better to listen to him first or else I'd misunderstand him. Well, he went there, and instead of flirting, my parents and my sister sat him down. After some grumbling about not being okay with him, my judgment, etc., they proclaimed they were willing to pay for my wedding on one condition. My sister would walk down the aisle. My parents insisted that my sister would walk down the aisle at my wedding first, in a wedding dress. Their excuse was that it wasn't okay for a younger sister to marry first, so it was only fair if my sister at least had the experience of it, at my venue, with pictures being taken, in the dress, and she'd even have a cake later. My husband will now type his part.